What's going on? Welcome to episode 22 of the Hike.files podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Zitzelman, and this week we're going to talk about the pros and cons of solo backpacking according to AI. Something a little bit different, kind of fun. I apologize if you can hear the train in the background. We had the earthquake last week, and we might also have a massive thunderstorm roll through. So just like when you're hiking, podcasting is very much affected by the weather. So, we got that. If you're enjoying the podcast and you want to show a little support, on the YouTube shop shelf below the video, there is a new Hike.files podcast t-shirt. So check that out if you want. I also put a link in the show notes to where you can check out the shirt. So what I did for this week's episode is I went into ChatGPT and I gave it two prompts. One, to list the 10 pros of backpacking solo, and the other was to list the 10 cons of backpacking solo. I haven't even really read them. I just put them in, had them generate, and we're going to go over them. And I'm going to give you my feedback on what it says, and if it really is relevant or if it's just talking out his butt, if AI has a butt. So let's get into the pros first, and we'll start with that. Number one, it says complete freedom. When you travel alone, you have the ultimate freedom to decide your itinerary, pace, and activities. There's no need to compromise with others on where to go or what to do. I do agree with that. It is nice having the complete freedom. I do agree with that. It is nice to have the freedom to make your own decisions, move at your own pace. Compromise, though, might be a strong word to use. It's just a different experience. I've done similar trips solo and with people, like same trail or same area by myself and with people. Neither one was better or worse than the other. They're just different. Other people might want to go see something different than you do, or might have a different point of view on something than you do. Something that you might walk right past because it's just not on your radar. Someone else might see, and it might be one of the coolest things you've ever experienced. Yeah, there is that complete freedom, which is very nice, but I don't see it as a compromise. I see it as just a different experience to have. Number two, personal growth. It says solo backpacking pushes you out of your comfort zone and encourages personal growth. You'll learn to be self-reliant, make decisions independently, and become more adaptable to new situations. Yes. Although, I guess when you're first starting, solo backpacking isn't your comfort zone. But for me, I love solo backpacking. That is my comfort zone. The personal growth part, sure, maybe I did it backwards. After some personal losses in my life, I just kind of left the area, went to Florida for about 6 years, was burned out on Pennsylvania, and I moved, and I basically spent 6 years on my own. I knew people. I had friends down there, but that's where I did my learning to be self-reliant and make decisions independently and do all that. But yeah, I could see how solo backpacking would do that. It ties back to the first one with the making independent decisions. You have to make every decision. And if that's not something you're comfortable with, that is obviously blah, 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 blah. So number two, personal growth. Solo backpacking pushes you out of your comfort zone and encourages personal growth. You'll learn to be self-reliant, make decisions independently, and become more adaptable to new situations. I do agree with this. I did it backwards. I spent 6 years in Florida. I moved from Pennsylvania, went to Florida. Everybody has a point in their life where a lot of personal loss comes at once, and it sucks. And I was burned out on the area, and I decided I'm leaving. So I think that's where I did my personal growth, was just 6 years of my life that I went and just learned how to be okay with myself. If you haven't had a situation like that, then solo backpacking is a great way to do that. For me, being solo on the trail is my comfort zone. I do spend a lot of time in my head. I work out a lot of situations in my head, a lot of issues, things going on in my life, whatever. So yeah, there's always room for personal growth. So if you're just starting or if you've been doing it for a while, yeah, you're always going to learn something. You have to be very adaptable because if you're solo, there's no one to rely on. So yeah, okay, personal growth. Yep. Even if you think you've done all the personal growth, done all the personal growing? Whatever. If you think you're as personally grown as you can be, we'll say it that way. There's always something you can learn. Number 3, flexibility. With no one else to consider, you can be spontaneous and change plans as you wish. You can linger in a place you love or move on quickly from somewhere that doesn't appeal to you. Again, this is going right back to number 1 with complete freedom. This is the problem with ChatGPT. This looks really good on paper, but it's just repeating itself. Yes, flexibility. You can do whatever you want, complete freedom. Number 4, meet new people. Traveling solo often leads to meeting more people. You're more approachable when alone, and it's easier to strike up conversations with locals and fellow travelers. I can agree with this to an extent. I don't always come across as the most approachable person, though. So a lot of times people ignore me when they see me. There's always kind of wave, and okay. Depending on, especially if I've been traveling solo, backpacking solo. This is traveling, but yeah, I'm usually a little more to myself. So I don't know if I'm more approachable that way, but I have met some interesting people when traveling solo, more so than when I'm traveling with other people or backpacking with other people. Number five, deep reflection. Here we go with the continuation of number 1. Solo travel allows for introspection and deep reflection. You'll have time to think about life, your goals, and what matters most to you without distractions. Yep, this is true and covered in Complete Freedom and Personal Growth. You do have a lot of time to think. And that is that's one of the weird things. I've had a few people say to me that they don't think they could do solo backpacking or just travel because they wouldn't be okay with being in their own head for that long, being alone with themselves for that long. That to me sounds like you've got some things to work out, and maybe you should spend a little time by yourself and do a little deep reflection. Yeah, it works as a standalone. Actually, all these things work as standalone. They did tie it all, ChatGPT, to wrap it all together with the first one, but sure, there's definitely deep reflection. Number 6, boosted confidence. Successfully navigating a foreign country or a challenging trek alone can significantly boost your self-confidence and belief in your abilities. Now, this I do absolutely agree in. I talked about this. I don't remember what episode it was. It was quite a ways back. It was called Hiking to Beehive, I believe. And in Acadia National Park, there's a mountain called the Beehive. Now, keep in mind, Acadia sits right on the coast. So a lot of the mountains they actually have a little range they call the bubbles. They're all just little domes. And they're quite large, some of them. They look small because they stick right up and pop down. But the Beehive got really steep sides. It looks like a beehive. And the trail that goes up it, at the base of the trail, it says, this is basically a one-way trail. You go up, don't come back down. There's other trails that bring you down, don't come back down this trail. And it's extremely steep, vertical in some spots, with rungs, like wrought iron rungs hammered into the rock. There's some wooden ladders. There's some little like footbridges that go across crevasses that just drop 100 feet below you, and you just go across them. Some spots the trail's only 3 feet wide with a sheer drop off on one side and a sheer cliff on the other, vertical wall. So there's no room for error. I have a massive fear of heights, and I hiked that by myself. And I almost didn't make it. There was 2 times where I had to stop, sit with like my back to one rock and looking at another rock. So I couldn't see the drop off. I couldn't see the height, and just bring myself back, control myself. And then I would have the thought of, if I don't get up and finish this now, I'm going to need to be rescued. So I forced my way through. And like I said, I did that solo. And when I got to the top, I'm not a big climb a mountain and get up there and do like the whole woohoo, but I did on that one. It was such a release of adrenaline and emotions to do that by myself. And that stuck with me for a long time. Actually, it still does. And I have a picture from that hike hanging in my living room. And in my new home, it's just on the opposite wall of the door, kind of catty corner. But in my old place, it was the first thing I saw when I walked in. Really, really cool. It was a great accomplishment for me. And yeah, it changed the way I think about a lot of things. So it definitely boosted my confidence. Not to say that I wouldn't have felt a sense of accomplishment if I would have done that with other people, but knowing I could do that by myself is just, that's a pretty big accomplishment for me. Number 7, cultural immersion. I don't know if this one really, I guess it could for backpacking if you're not doing something like the AT, if you're doing this overseas, you're doing this in like Europe where you're going through different countries, sure. Traveling alone encourages a deeper immersion in local cultures. You're more likely to interact with locals, try new foods, and engage in authentic experiences. I guess you could say that there's different local cultures along backpacking trails if you're doing something larger like the Appalachian Trail. I've never done anything like that where I was going through, not solo anyway, state to state, but it's a little different in the US. Number 8, problem-solving skills. When you're on your own, you'll encounter challenges that force you to think on your feet and find solutions independently. This improves your problem-solving skills. Absolutely does. Everything from how to get across a swollen creek that the bridge is washed out to how do you get up this section of trail that's steep or whatever. You can't find a good campsite for your hammock or for your tent, or you forget a piece of gear or anything like that. You get off the trail, you get lost. You've got to solve those problems on your own, and you got to do it quickly. Problem-solving skills, definitely. You should have some problem-solving skills before you hit the trail if you're going to do it solo, but definitely going to help. Number 9, empowerment. Completing a solo backpacking trip empowers you to realize you can achieve anything you set your mind to. It demonstrates your independence and resourcefulness. It does. And I think that sense of empowerment increases with the size of the trip. If I'm doing a 6-mile solo overnight, maybe a little less empowering than completing the Quehanna Trail, 75 miles in like one of the most remote wilderness areas in Pennsylvania. And I'm sure that is nothing compared to doing something like the 250-mile Mid-State Trail or the 1,200-mile Ice Age Trail or the 2,200-mile Appalachian Trail. And I'm sure it's nothing compared to doing like the 250-mile, or it's a 300-mile, it might be closer to 300-mile Mid-State Trail, or the 1,200-mile Ice Age Trail, or the 2,200-mile Appalachian Trail, all different accomplishments. So yeah, I think the bigger the trip, the bigger the empowerment. And then number 10, unmatched serenity. Solo backpacking can offer unparalleled serenity. There's a unique peace that comes from being alone in nature or exploring a foreign city with just your thoughts. Again, the foreign city travel part of that, I'm sure it's true. I haven't done that yet. But yeah, when you are alone, the serenity, the solitude of it, it is a different experience. And I have this thing we joke around, or my friends and I, we call it map brain, where I can see, not gnat brain, map brain. Well, actually, either would probably work, but map brain is basically when I'm in a spot, I can see myself on like a top-down view of a map of where I am and what's around me, and like GPS. And there's been times where I've been out solo. In the Catskills was one. My first solo trip up in the Catskills. I was out there for 3 days, up around the Wittenberg Mountain, Burroughs Range area. And there's really nothing out there. It was in February. It was like a warm stretch. It was in between storms. I saw nobody for almost 4 full days from the time I got gas the night before I left till I was on my way home and getting gas at the end of the trip. Didn't see a soul. And yeah, it's a very cool experience. The serenity, it was just so relaxing. It was so actually comforting to me. The last night I was there, I stayed at one campsite. I made a base camp, and it was right off of a rock bald. And I got back to camp. I went out and did some exploring. I was going to do Wittenberg, and I decided against it because I was having a couple gear issues that I didn't want to push. Nothing that I didn't fix, but I just didn't want to take that chance of going up Wittenberg and having something fail. I just stayed. I did a smaller mountain called Terrace Mountain, just hiked around and explored a little bit, and then went back to camp. And I got back early, like maybe 2:00 or something. And I just sat out on that rock bald for hours until the sun went down, and just sat there and looked out at the Catskills, just this section of New York. And there is civilization around, but you just can't see it from up there. And it was just so peaceful. It was awesome. Absolutely love that. So yeah, that's a good one on there. So yeah, it's the ChatGPT pros. Interesting. Some of them are a little repetitive, but I agree with most of them. I can find something to agree with on all of them. So those are pretty good. So next, let's jump to what ChatGPT thinks the 10 cons of backpacking solo are. And these are basically just flip sides of what we just talked about. So number 1, loneliness. One of the most significant downsides of solo backpacking is the potential for loneliness, especially during long trips or in remote areas where you may not encounter many people. For me, that's what I'm actually going for. I'm going for that lack of people. So yeah, I guess there's times where you might be out there for a couple days and not see somebody, and you might come across like a waterfall or just something that you think, oh, so-and-so would really like that. And you go, oh yeah, they're not here. I don't know if I've actually experienced the loneliness factor when I'm solo. I think because when I'm going solo, that's what I'm intending to do. But maybe I have to do longer solo trips and see how that goes. But I can see how that would affect some people. If you haven't gotten that personal growth part, right, where you're okay with being by yourself, then loneliness might come into it. I have been watching some people on the AT, and a couple of them have gotten to a point where they started early and there's no one else out there. And they're like, oh, I thought there'd be more people. And I'm watching them and I'm going, oh my God, when did you start? That's when I need to do it. Because less people, not that, again, I have nothing against people on the trail. But if I'm going out to do something solo, I want to be solo. That's not for everybody, I guess. Number 2, safety concerns. Traveling alone can raise safety concerns, particularly in unfamiliar or potentially risky destinations. There's no one to watch your back or help in case of emergencies. This is very, very true, and this is something that you need to be prepared for. You can't prepare for everything, but some of the ways that I help counter that for myself is I don't like hiking with my trekking poles. I carry them because I use them for my shelter, and I carry them for emergencies. But when I'm solo, I usually have at least one of them out, and in rockier or slightly more dangerous areas, I will use both just because they become my backup. And there's been several trips, Allegheny Front Trail, Chuck Hyper Trail, the Quihana Trail, where I did those solo. And yeah, my trekking poles saved my butt. I slipped on a rock, or because some of those trails are really narrow and they're on like the edges of steep inclines. And if you slide, you're going to go for a while. Yeah, there's definitely things I do slightly differently when I'm solo to help mitigate those instances. Trekking poles is one. If it's raining or wet, I slow way down. I don't need to cruise. I take my time. I pay more attention to where I am. And I think that's part of the being, you got to be more self-aware when you're by yourself. It doesn't eliminate the chance that something can go wrong, but it helps to greatly mitigate that fact. And that also will help transfer over to when you're hiking with other people, because now you're kind of what has helped you on your own. So you'll see other people, maybe not making mistakes, or doing anything dangerous, but you might be like, hey, maybe we should not do that. Number 3, decision fatigue. Constantly making decisions on your own, from where to stay, what to eat, can lead to decision fatigue and sometimes indecisiveness. I could see that. You see this on the AT sometimes. This is what a lot of people just get. They don't know, should I go to this shelter? Should I take a zero? Should I do this? I've defaulted on this, and it's taken years to get this in my head. There's certain things that just become automatic decisions. If I'm unsure if I should stop and get something to eat, or if I'm unsure do I need to stop for water, that's an immediate yes. Stop for water, stop for food. Should I take a break? If it isn't clear in my head, then it's an absolute definite yes. You got to train yourself to do that. But it's difficult, but it will help. And sometimes you just need to not make the decision. Sometimes the best decision is to stop, set up camp, even if you've only gone a couple miles. But if you're really getting indecisive, stop. Just don't make decisions. Hang out, get in your tent, get in your hammock, sit in your chair, stare at a tree, listen to a creek. Just stop and let yourself relax and reset. Because if you get indecisive, that's when you start making mistakes. So if you're feeling like you're having decision fatigue solo, it's time to stop. And not quit, but maybe take that day off if you can. If you got to make miles, then you got to make miles, but at least stop for a while. There's nothing that says you can't hike a little bit later or go a little bit, make up miles one day, because you're always better safe than sorry. Number 4, limited support. Without a travel companion, you lack the immediate support of someone to rely on in challenging situations or when feeling unwell. Yep. Absolutely. This goes back to the decision fatigue and safety concerns. Without someone else there, it all falls on you. You've got to be able to make those decisions. And these are the kinds of things that lead to decision fatigue. If you're going solo, and it's always a good idea. I've got a limited version of the InReach. My Garmin watch does have something similar to that. It does rely on my phone to have signal, which is less and less of an issue as time goes on because there seems to be signal everywhere. But when I went out to when I went out to Wisconsin, I borrowed Dragon's spot just so I had it, just in case, because I was nowhere near anybody out there. So just in case, it is a good thing to have. If you're going to be doing a lot of solo trips, it's something that you probably should have because it just takes away one of those worries. If something goes drastically wrong and you get injured, you can call for rescue. Don't do it just because you're hungry, because they will charge you for it. But yeah, that does help with that. It gives you a little bit more support. There are ways that's probably the best way to help yourself if you're going to be solo for a long time. Number 5, increased costs. Some costs like accommodations and transportation can be higher when traveling solo, as you don't have the benefit of splitting expenses with a partner or group. Not really a concern for backpacking unless you have to pay for a shelter permit or something like that. If you're backpacking, generally, you just need the gas to get there and you're carrying your own food anyway. That for travel, yeah, for backpacking, unless you're doing something really long, like the AT, but you've already calculated that cost for something like the AT anyway. Number 6, less safety in numbers. Traveling alone can make you a more attractive target to scams, theft, harassment, as you lack the safety of your numbers that comes with traveling in a group. Yep, not so much for backpacking. Sure, it can happen on the trail, but it's less likely. Now, if you're doing something more long distance like the Appalachian Trail and you're going through towns, okay, sure. But a lot of times you're going through trail towns and they're usually very hiker friendly. And so you're never really alone, which is nice about things like the Appalachian Trail, because when you're doing something that long, you do want that support. Number 7, language barriers. Nope. Unless you're doing backpacking through a foreign country, you're not going to have this problem. Number 8, limited shared experiences. Solo travelers miss out on shared experiences and memories that come from exploring new places with others. I touched on this in the pros that, yeah, sometimes I was in the pros, safety concerns, decision, loneliness. So yeah, I did touch on this already a little bit. Sometimes you just get to a spot where you're like, oh, so-and-so would really like this spot or something like that. Yep, you lack those shared experiences, but you do get to share your experiences with other people, because other people that you know who are into this kind of thing are going to want to hear about it anyway. And then you've always got stories to tell. Number 9, handling emergencies alone. I swear we just went over this very same thing, safety concerns. Dealing with unexpected emergencies or health issues can be more stressful, complicated when you're alone in a foreign country. Again, this is if you're in a foreign country. On the trail, sure, you do have to know how to handle those emergencies. But if you're doing something that's really, really big, you should have something like a spot or an InReach, something like that anyway. Number 10, lack of emotional support. Traveling solo means you might not have someone to share exciting moments with or lean on during more challenging times, which can impact your overall experience. And ChatGPT strikes again, rehashing several other aspects of this list into the last one. Yes, when you're by yourself, you are by yourself, and there's no one there. Now, with the magic of technology, you're a little less alone if you've got a phone with you, and you can talk to people and share those moments. But yeah, you got to understand that you're going to be the only one there. So that is the 10 pros and cons of solo backpacking as according to, and so those are the 10 pros and cons of solo backpacking according to AI. Yeah, I obviously AI has never gone backpacking, so it's just pulling information off the internet. A lot of these things roll in together. Probably could have done this 5 of each and been good. Yeah, look, there are a lot of pros and cons. You do have to be okay with being by yourself, or you've got to be okay with the idea of learning to be by yourself. If you're just starting, you don't know. So you hear a lot of people say that never go solo. It's dangerous to go solo. Where I go in the Northeast, we don't have grizzlies. We don't have brown bears. We don't have many mountain lions. I mean, we do have them. Unofficially, we have them. I know all the states up here say they don't exist, but I think we've all seen evidence of them. We know they're here. The most dangerous thing in the woods is another person. Second to that would be ticks. And then, mice getting into your food, and then maybe bears, if they're really grumpy that day. Black bears really want to be left alone. They are the champions of solo backpacking. They really want to be left alone. You really need to be more concerned about other people, but for the most part, from what I've seen on a trail, I have come across a few odd people, but very few and far between. I would imagine you'd see more on something like the Appalachian Trail, where it's more popular. There's easier access to it. You're never really too remote on the Appalachian Trail, so it is easy for people to get on the trail, which is a concern. But if you've been hiking on the AT for a while, you know the people that are out there. You spent some time with them. You've probably wound up in a hostel or two with these people. So you've got a group of people that you can rely on. And that is your safety numbers there. If you're doing something more remote, like I tend to do, trails like the Guihana or like the smaller loop trails that are larger for what a lot of people do, but then you don't really run into people. You can, but they're generally out there trying to get away from people too. I guess the best thing to say is live the experience and be safe. That's going to do it for me for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've got any topics you'd like to hear me touch on, or you want to add to either one of these lists, shoot me an email at hike.files@gmail.com. Be glad to read what you have to say. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your week. See you in the next.